It's super terror time. Okay, you guys, now I know I'm being ridiculous, but let's be honest. All of us, if we're honest, we've all imagined being a superhero. Maybe we loved the costume or the gadgets. Maybe we dreamed of having some sort of cool superpower that we could use to control other people or save the world, right? I mean, I love a good superhero movie. There's all these new movies. There's even these like spin-off TV shows. And one of my favorite things about superheroes is the backstory. I always love a good story that sort of zooms in and you get to see a glimpse of how did they get these powers? What was their story before all of this? What happened? I think it's cool because it gives us a glimpse of who these superheroes are. But here's the reality. All of us actually have a backstory. So we're in this series called It's Personal, where we're exploring getting to know God personally and really getting personal with other people. But here's the thing, a lot of us assume that just because we know someone's name or the things someone's good at or the things that they're into, that we really know them. But there's more to people than just what we see on the outside. In fact, we're missing out on the backstory of every single person. You see, we all have a backstory, and I think a lot of us, we wish that people understood our stories more so they could understand us better. I mean, think about it. Have you ever wished that your coach understood what it takes for you to get to practice? Maybe your parents can't drive you, and so you have to take the bus, and you have to pay for the bus by yourself. And sometimes you just don't have the cash. And it takes a lot for you to actually get to practice when maybe a lot of the other parents are able to drive their kids. Or maybe with your parents. Maybe you wish your parents understood the drama that you have going on with your friends so that when you come home, they wouldn't give you such a hard time. They'd be a little bit more gracious with you. Or maybe with your friends. Maybe you've been struggling with depression and anxiety and you thought, oh, if my friends knew what I've been dealing with, they wouldn't get so upset at me that I'm not texting back as much. You see, all of that is your backstory. We look for people to understand our stories better in hopes that they can understand us. But are we doing our part to understand people better? You see, I think we're missing out sometimes because we're not really getting personal with those around us when we don't really know their backstory. So in this series, we've been looking at this interaction between Jesus and this dude named Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus is not the superhero of the story. He's more like the super villain. And that's because he was a tax collector. He was working for the Roman government. And remember, the Roman government, they were basically bullying, suppressing the Jewish people. And Zacchaeus was a Jewish guy himself. And so his people, very own people, were kind of mad at Zacchaeus. He became an outcast with his own community because he was not only taking money for the Roman government, but he was also stealing. He was taking more than he needed to fill up his own pockets. So he really was an outcast in his community. But when Jesus comes to town, Zacchaeus, just like everyone else, he wants to see Jesus. But he's this short dude, so he has to climb up a tree to go and get eyes on this Jesus dude coming to town. But here's the cool thing. Jesus takes the time to understand people he meets. Listen to what I mean. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. Now, I love this story. I think it's so cool that just Jesus calls right out and says, dude, Zacchaeus, I want to come to your house. Come down, let's go. I mean, it's this amazing moment where Zacchaeus probably feels seen, he feels known. I mean, what a cool moment, especially in front of this whole community. And everyone around is kind of upset, like, does Jesus not know the word on the street about how sinful and gross and evil this dude is? I mean, their minds were just blown. Like, why would Jesus want to hang out with this guy? And I'm sure Zacchaeus probably had that same thing running through his mind, like, does Jesus know who I am? What's happening? But here's the cool thing. Jesus stops and says, Zacchaeus, I want to go to your house. Jesus doesn't just say, hey, can we go hang out? I'd like to get to know you. He says, I want to go to your place. I want to get to know you. I want to go to your place, your home, where maybe you can let your guard down. You can actually show me the real you, where you can be vulnerable, be honest. I want to know your backstory. Now, I don't know what it was going to be like at Zacchaeus' house. If Jesus was going to kick back around the barbecue with Zacchaeus and Zacchaeus was going to be like, hey, Jesus, do you want a dog? Do you want a burger? What do you want? I mean, I know that's kind of silly, but we kind of picture this in our mind, right? Of Jesus and Zacchaeus hanging out, just getting comfortable and just relaxing and getting to know one another. And the thing is I think Jesus was inviting himself over so that he could get to know Zacchaeus in a deeper and more personal way. In fact, I think Jesus knew that there was more to Zacchaeus than what the rest of the town understood or thought that they knew about him. But here's the crazy thing, you guys. Jesus is God. So he actually already knew Zacchaeus' story. He knew all the things he had done. He knew how he was being talked about by the rest of the community. He probably even knew what Zacchaeus thought of himself. And yet Jesus was trying to spend time with him to help him to see, dude, I love you. I know who you are, and yet I want to spend time with you. You matter. Now, when it comes to understanding our own stories and the stories of other people, we can actually take a clue from Jesus in how to get personal with other people. In fact, let me read this verse from the letter to the Philippians that Paul had written that we've actually talked about at youth group before. Listen to what it says. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. You see, Jesus, he stepped into the earth as a human. He walked in our shoes. He stepped into our stories. He made it personal. And this is what I love about the story of Zacchaeus, is that we get to see a glimpse of how Jesus sees us. He knows our stories. He knows the things we've done wrong. He knows what people say about us that hurts us. He knows what we even think about ourselves. He knows what we worry about, what we stress about, maybe what we even dream about. And he says to us, I know your story, and I want you to invite me into it. I love you. That's why I came into the earth. That's why I died on a cross, to make it personal, to set us free from all of that stuff so that we could be in a right relationship with him. And that's what I love about the story. And so I think the main point that I want us all to kind of grapple with is it's personal because Jesus understands your story. Now, since he already understands our story, we can actually take steps into connecting with him and to connect with others, to make it personal. And I think some of us, we need to start first by wrestling with the idea and acknowledging that Jesus knows you. And I know that's really hard for us because some of us think if Jesus really knew me, he wouldn't like me. He wouldn't want me. And yet the story of Zacchaeus completely shatters that idea that Jesus already knows your story. He knows your backstory. And he wants you to invite him into your story, to make it personal, for you to get to know him. And so for some of us, we need to wrestle with that idea and to actually make that step to make it personal with Jesus, to invite him in, to say, yeah, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to get to know you and I'm going to be honest with you about all the stuff going on in my life. Now, here's the other thing about that. For some of us, we may say, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, I might even say I love him, but I don't know if I know him personally and I'm allowing him to know me personally. So this week, your step may be to start thinking about that and start opening up to God about the personal things going on in your life. Now, the other thing is that for some of us, we need to begin to let others into our story by being brave and courageous and sharing with others a little bit about our backstory. So I encourage you, share with your small group, share with your small group leader about who you really are. In fact, that's why we have small groups. I know that we hope that we can open up our youth group again really soon and start doing large group gatherings and do the teachings and the games together again soon. But we're always going to have small groups because we always want safe space for people to be known, to make it personal, to share their backstories. So that's a piece that we're always going to have because we know the value in letting people into our story. But here's the last step. For some of us, you need to begin to really understand the stories of others. Ask questions, show up. And sometimes when we share personally, when we open up about our backstory, it makes people feel safe that they can share their stories too. You see, our lives can change when we allow people to see who we are, to understand our stories, and even more when we begin to understand the stories of others. This week, I want to close with this question. What does it look like to have others understand your story and for you to understand theirs? We actually have the opportunity to get personal, to really understand one another and to see how God is moving in the story of our lives. So join us this Thursday as we continue the conversation together at Youth Group.